What if the most honorable man in Westeros made one different choice? What if Ned Stark looked King Robert in the eye, smiled, and said, "No. No to King's Landing. No to the South. No to the Game of Thrones. Just no." One word. That's all it would have taken to save his life, protect his family, and maybe prevent one of the bloodiest eras Westeros had ever seen. But here's what no one talks about. If Ned stays in Winterfell, the entire realm might still burn, just in a very different way. Let's go back to that moment. Robert Baratheon rides into Winterfell like thunder fat, loud and smelling of wine and old glory. He has one thing on his mind. He wants his old friend by his side. He needs Ned as Hand of the King. And Ned? Ned doesn't want to go. Catelyn begs him not to. Maester Luwin advises caution. Every instinct in that wolf's blood tells him the South is a viper's pit. But Ned Stark is a man of duty. And duty, in this world, is a death sentence. Now just imagine he refuses. Maybe he tells Robert the truth. I am needed here. The North needs its lord. Maybe he uses the wildlings beyond the wall as an excuse. Maybe he blames his leg, the old wound that still aches in the cold. Robert would be furious. He'd roar and slam his cup and call Ned stubborn as a mule. But would he force him? Here's the thing about Robert Baratheon. Beneath all that rage, there's still the echo of a man who loved Ned Stark like a brother. He wouldn't drag him south in chains. So Robert rides back to King's Landing alone, without his hand, without his conscience. And the realm is already cracking at the seams. In Winterfell, life continues, but not quietly. Ned still receives the Raven. He still learns that Jon Arryn is dead, but this time he investigates from a distance, quietly, through informants, through his own network. And here's where it gets interesting. Ned is a patient man when he's on his home ground. In King's Landing, he moved too fast, trusted too openly, showed his hand too soon. But in the North, he plays an entirely different game. He sends his own men south. He watches, he waits. And somewhere in the shadows of a letter, or the whisper of a merchant's rumor, he pieces it together. Cersei's secret. The truth about Joffrey. But now what does he do with it? Stay with me, because this is where the road splits into something terrifying. Because Ned staying alive doesn't mean everything gets better. It might mean everything gets worse just for different people. Without Ned in King's Landing, Cersei has no enemy to watch, no honorable fool telegraphing his every move. The Lannisters don't play defense, they play offense. Tywin Lannister, one of the most dangerous minds in the history of Westeros, now has a clear field. There's no Ned stumbling into secrets, no one threatening to ride for the North with explosive knowledge. Joffrey still ascends the throne when Robert dies. And Robert will die. He's a drunk on a boar hunt with enemies on every side. That doesn't change. But here's what does. Without Ned's arrest, without the spark that sets the Riverlands on fire, the War of the Five Kings might never ignite. Or it might ignite differently. Because Robb Stark, sitting in Winterfell with his father very much alive, doesn't march south in a grief-fueled rage. Robb was brilliant, but reckless, driven by the sight of his father's severed head. Remove that image from his mind, and you remove the fire that made him both legendary and doomed. The young wolf never howls, and the North sits still. But the Lannisters, they don't sit still. They never do. Here's the dark irony. Ned's death in our story was a tragedy that unified the North. Robb's armies swelled because men were angry, because honor demanded revenge. Without that, the North is powerful but passive, and a passive North is exactly what Tywin Lannister prays for. He consolidates the South. Joffrey sits the Iron Throne. The Tyrells ever practical bend their flowers toward the new sun. The Freys stay loyal. The Arryns stay neutral. The realm doesn't fall into war. It falls into tyranny. A slow, quiet, suffocating tyranny, with Joffrey's cruelty given unlimited room to breathe and Cersei's paranoia shaping every decree. The small folk suffer, the lords grumble, but no one moves. Because Ned Stark is alive in the North, and the Lannisters know that if they push too far, if they give him a reason, the man who held the line at the Tower of Joy, the man who marched on Pike, the man who never once broke his word, that man will come south with winter at his back. And that threat That shadow of Ned Stark might be more powerful than Ned himself ever was. But what about the real threat? The one that has nothing to do with thrones or gold or lions and wolves? Here's what Ned always knew that no one else took seriously. The White Walkers. In the original story, the Night's Watch crumbles. Jon Snow stumbles into his destiny half by accident, half by fire. The wall is defended by broken men and miracle. But if Ned never leaves the North, he's there, present, watching. And Ned Stark was no fool about the North. He listened to the Rangers. He took the old stories seriously. He sent Jon to the Wall not as a punishment but as an honor because he believed in what the Watch was meant to be. With Ned alive and powerful, the Night's Watch gets resources, it gets men, it gets respect. Maybe the Wall holds longer. Maybe the dead never breach it. Or maybe, and this is the version that haunts you at night, Ned Stark marches north of the Wall himself. Because that's who he is. He goes where duty calls, even into the dark. And beyond the Wall, in the frozen silence, something ancient stirs. Something that doesn't care about kings or crowns or the Game of Thrones. Something cold. Something patient. Would Ned survive it? Would his honor, his loyalty, his wolf-gray eyes and northern blood be enough against an enemy that death itself cannot stop? Or would the most honorable man in Westeros finally meet the one enemy that honor cannot defeat? Here's what makes this question so devastating. Ned Stark going south wasn't just a decision, it was a domino. And when it fell, it knocked over every other piece. The war, the weddings, the dragons, the dead. If he stays, the domino stands. But standing still isn't the same as winning. Because Westeros is a world that punishes good men for being good. The game doesn't stop because you refuse to play. The White Walkers don't care about your honor. The Lannisters don't fear your righteousness. Maybe Ned alive in Winterfell saves his family. Maybe it saves the realm. Or maybe, just maybe, it only delays the fire and the ice that were always coming no matter what any one man chose. One word could have changed everything. No. And we'll never stop wondering what that world would have looked like. If you want to go deeper, what if Robb had never broken his oath? What if Daenerys had landed in Westeros 10 years earlier? The what-ifs of this world are endless. Drop your biggest Ned Stark theory in the comments. Would he have survived the long night, or would duty have killed him anyway? Like and subscribe because winter is always coming, and so is the next video.